What is going on out there, lacrosse fans and bettors alike? It's another edition of Bet On Lacrosse, and you're going to have pretty much 2 weeks to dive into this one, to really dig deep on the analysis that me and my co-host with the co-most give you as we get into the episode. I'm Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks on Twitter. Reach out to me, drop me a line. Would love to chat with you. Over the weekend, had some folks reaching out to me and the co-host with the co-most asking us about some of our picks. You can always find all of our picks right here on the show, Bet On Lacrosse. He is Doug Greenberg at Doug Greenberg on Twitter. Dougie, how are you doing, my man? And I know, at least when we're talking lacrosse betting, you're doing pretty good, brother. How's it going?
Recently, man, the pendulum has finally swung back this way, right? I'm good, man. It was a cool weekend. It was a fun weekend for PLL, for our bets in particular. We both did, pretty good. Pretty good.
Oh, you got me on the board. Got you, bro.
Pretty good.
There you go. I always have the Larry David ready to go on the soundboard for you, Doug. Come on, man.
Yeah, I knew you got me. But yeah, no, it was a good one. And we got yet another bye week coming up here for the PLL season before the finale, as they would say. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched. I'm pretty excited to dig into this board.
Yeah, I never realized, like when we first saw the PLL schedule come out, I was just like, oh my God, we have lacrosse from like now until September. And then I feel like every week we're like, well, you just got to wait one more week for the buys. Hey, if it's getting us the high quality games that we've seen, I'll tolerate it regardless. So as mentioned, he's Doug Greenberg, producing the show as always, Hutton Jackson at Hutton Jackson. What we're going to do on the show today, as we're kind of previewing the games that will be going off August 13th weekend. So, you have a little bit of a lead up for that. We'll go through how our best bets did last week, talk about our EMOs, our overall rankings. We'll get you the ATS standings, because if you just look at how the standings look in the PLL, ATS numbers tell a whole different story. You might even see a 2-6 team in the top 3 of our Bet on Lacrosse ATS rankings. We'll be sharing that with you. We'll get into the PLL futures. And then, as always, folks, the meat and potatoes that you come each and every week for. We're going through each and every game, and we got 6 of them that are going to be going down in Albany leading in to the playoffs this year for PLL, looking to crown a champion for the 3rd time. And I don't know, might be the Whips hoisting it again after we see that the rich get richer. We joked on our first episode about, the Whips can't keep getting away with this. A great line by you. And then what do? They continue to get away with this. An absolute steal, as it was reported by the post-game podcast that Guterding was going to be making his way to the Whips. Lacrosse Twitter was saying there's no way this is real. This has to be Ocello messing with everybody. No, it is. It's really happening. Guterding is going to the Whips. Does that move the needle for you, or without Rambo news, Whips still a kind of a question mark for you, Doug, before we start getting into it today, man?
It definitely helps them. I mean, it doesn't hurt to bring on a player of Justin Guterding's.
Even when he's kind of struggled this year, for what it's worth, he hasn't had his typical, gutty up kind of season, but, he's still, like you said, a premier player in this league.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there are bigger issues with Chrome at play here. And maybe that contributed a little bit to Guterding's, his, a little bit of a down year. I can see him definitely returning to form with Whips. Obviously, Whips have their own issues right now. It's definitely a very shocking move. It's a little bit, it's a little bit hard to see what Chrome are getting back in this case.
Yeah.
Gil's a fine player, but he's not Justin Guterding. He doesn't have nearly that kind of value. I personally also don't really understand how salaries work in this league. So it's not like we can say it was a salary dump or anything like that. But it's really hard to see how this is. It's really hard to see how this is a fair trade for Chrome, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes there. You got to think that, maybe they could have found a better trade suitor than Whipsnakes. If for no other reason, like here's the example. And I don't think my buddy from my fantasy baseball league is listening to this, but he always makes these trades with these people and they always benefit him. And I keep saying to everyone else, I'm saying, do not
these trades.
I know. I say, do not trade with him. Do not give him the pieces that he needs, because he's just going to win the league. And it's as much about not letting him win as it is about you winning.
Yeah.
Because if he wins the league, then you can't win the league. And so, and that's exactly what keeps happening with Whipsnakes everybody just keeps letting Whipsnakes like do these crazy things with their roster, whether it was drafting Connor Curse or whether it was now trading for Justin Guterding. Like it's crazy that the league just keeps letting them do this. And I'm not blaming anyone in particular. I'm just like, but guys, let's get a little bit more self-awareness here. And again, I have no problem with Whipsnakes either, per se. I mean, except I have a Water Dogs future ticket in there, but and they're doing just fine. But it's definitely a very bizarre turn of events late in the season. But I guess we'll just have to see how it shakes out.
No, I'm right there with you. And it's funny because after Redwoods was able to get TD Ierlan in the draft there, I believe was the opening weekend, there was a video of head coach Nat St. Laurent, who was basically saying, we love you, Sudes, like, thanks for letting us get TD. Well, I'm sure Stags thought the exact same thing. Love you, Sudes, because you just gave us Guterding. And like you said, fine prospect coming back. And if defense is really what you're looking for, maybe the Chrome defense would be different if JT's Giles Harris was able to get on the field for him. Chrome adding Tarafenko as well was great defensively, but I think they have just as many question marks on the offensive end. You shuffled around, you bring in Malloy, you shuffle around that offense, and you really don't get much added output. Sure, you made a game decent against a great goalie like Blaze Reardon late in the game after, you could argue you might have already been entering garbage time. But, I think there's just as many questions offensively for Chrome as there are defensively that I was just scratching my head, and take out completely the fact that, if the Whips do get Rambo back and now have Guterding, and then hopefully you can get Zed back to form because he seems like he hasn't been 100% this year. All of a sudden, a team that has kind of been falling out of graces, the Whips, are right there knocking on the door, and they've locked up their playoff spot too. So somebody's going to have to out the Whips, and in the first 2 years of the league, no one had done it yet. So let's get into it. Those are our thoughts on the big trade that rocked Lax Twitter. Last week, we stayed perfecto, baby, on the best bets. Beautiful. I moved to 4-2 on the year. You right there at 3-3. So we've been cashing tickets for folks all year long. I was on the Cannons plus 1.5. You were on the Chaos plus 1.5. A win outright for you as we go 4 straight on our best bet winners. And then we had the head-to-head EMO. I was taking the Whips minus 1.5 in a bounce back spot. You said, my future's looking good on the Water Dogs, and it's going to look even better when they take the Whips to task. You were bold enough to take the Doggos outright money line as your EMO. Your boldness paid off, because in our first head-to-head bet here on the Bet on Lacrosse show, you come out victorious. You are the co-host with the co-most for a reason. And now, when we all are in Philly together for the playoffs, first round, second round, on me after the EMO win for you. So what are you drinking? You're gonna go like a highball glass? You a beer kind of guy? You're gonna go mixed drink? What are you thinking for your first drink that's on me after your big win, brother? And congratulations, great call on that one, man.
Well, thank you. First of all, co-host with the co-host for co-most for this week. Yeah. At least
always and forever, as I said in the gift that I dropped your way, little Napoleon Dynamite nod there.
Exactly. It was funny too, because I realized after we recorded that episode that there was a scenario where we both could have lost, aka Whips winning by 1, and that would have been really, really funny.
That would have been the best. And we just cancel the show at that point.
Yeah, that's the best. That would have been the best possible scenario, but it's okay. I came out on top with the Water Dogs. I'm supposed to drink Yingling when I'm in Pennsylvania, right? Isn't that right or no? No.
I'll get you some Philly brewery stuff. There's a lot better
Okay.
stuff down there in Philly. Sorry, Yingling drinkers. I think there's some better options out there. But way to know your regional drinks, man. Well done.
Well, right. I imagine that's like saying to somebody from Boston, like, "Oh, you guys all drink Sam Adams here, right?" Like, I'm like, no.
613, great brewery up that way, by the way. Great beer.
A lot of good ones. Yeah.
So I'll get you some good Philly stuff, man, for the first head-to-head bet. Appreciated, I'm sure, and reciprocated. I'll also take you for the best damn cheesesteak you'll ever have. Shout out Woodrow's Cheesesteaks if you want to sponsor the show. Overall, I took a bit of a bath last week, 2-3 against the spread. Hutton staying hot, 5-0. 2 straight weeks. He's on a 10-0 run right now. He's moved to 500 on the year, 15-15. I'm right there at 18-2, and you right there as well, 15-15. We're all looking to stay above that 52%, and we're going to look to do so with the final part of the season coming to wind down. So, Doug, if you don't mind, I guess ATS ranking time. And then we'll get into the show here. Let us run down the future board, but we'll start at the top. They're 6-2 against the spread. There are 6-2 straight up. That is Atlas. And Atlas got off their little cover streak. They had covered in 5 straight games. And then they end up, or I guess it would have been 6 straight games because they were coming into the weekend, covering 5 straight. They cover the first game. Second game, they get the win, but they do not cover against the Cannons, who we'll talk about in just a second. Your doggos sporting those awesome purple domes, 5-3 against the number, 5-3 straight up. Huge outright win that didn't even seem that close as they dominate the Whipsnakes. Terrific win. Probably you could argue the biggest in the Water Dogs history with that win over Whips. I don't care if they're banged up or not. Impressive win last week. Cannons 2-6 straight up, but 5-3 against the number. I have some interesting numbers on Cannons that we'll share when breaking down the games, but even though they lose, they stay nice against that number as an underdog. They're unblemished, but they do not get the win they need, setting up a interesting week 7 for them here. Archers 4-3 against the number. They're 4-3 straight up. They got off the snide with a nice win against the Redwoods. They were underdogs for the first time last season. They not only cover that number, they get the W as well. The Woods 4-3. They're 3-4 against the number. Chaos 3-4 straight up, but they are 3-4 against the spread as well. Chaos with a nice win last week. Yet another outright win as an underdog. You could argue maybe they shouldn't have been underdogs against the Chrome, who are the worst team in the league, 2-6 straight up, 2-6 against the spread. Their only 2 wins against the spread, and straight up for what it's worth, came as 2.5-point dogs. I'll have a little bit more on that. And in between the Chauce Chrome sandwich, you have the Whipsnakes. So they're 4-3. You look at the rankings, you say, oh my goodness, the Whipsnakes, they're doing it again. ATS, they're 2-5 against the number. I think this is a clear denotation, if that's a word, that that the Whipsnakes coming into this year clearly had a lot of market love. They were, like plus 175 in the future market to start the year to win the championship. So, clearly the market came into this year loving them because they're the only champion they've ever known. They have failed to cover as favorites. They have yet to be, or they covered their one game, as an underdog. It was an outright win against the Archers. But that's a team whose expectations have not matched the reality. And there's your ATS rankings, Doug.
Mm-hmm. It's really crazy to kind of see what's happened with Whips because, it was easy to love them, right? And this is why, like, you have to, especially when you're thinking about futures at the beginning of the season, you need to think about things from a value perspective, right? Obviously, you want to pick the winner. And even if you really believe that Whipsnakes were going to do it, at that point, just don't bet anything because there's just no value with Whips there. Because, you're buying as high as you can on them, basically. As high as humanly possible after they have just won 2 straight championships. And that's, it's just the thing you got to be careful with when it comes to futures. You really got to look at what kind of value you're getting as opposed to just picking the winner, which I've been a victim of that before.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, that's why we try not only giving the picks in the game and everything, we try and talk a little bit more betting theory, because I feel like in a lower volume sport like lacrosse, there's a lot that you can learn about how to become a better as opposed to just, oh, what do you got this week? You know what I mean? You're going to learn a lot more in the long run, thinking about the theory, thinking about the value, thinking about things like you can learn on a daily basis. In Doug's article, The Rundown, follow him on Twitter at Doug Greenberg. I learn a lot and check that out every day. And it's not too bad when you're giving me winners in the middle of the night of people getting on the podium and whatnot. So I love waking up and having winners on my phone from something that I placed, at 4 a.m. because Doug said, hey, this will be a fun look for us. Here's my bold pick. Check that out again. It's The Rundown. So before we get into the games this week, you mentioned value and buying high, or buying low, selling high rather. This future market has shaken up. The team that we were just talking about with the Whips earlier this week, you were able to get them at plus 700. Now with the Guterding news, they ticked down, 50 cents. They're at plus 650. But here are the standings. If you're looking at who is expected to win this championship, there is no one, who's chalk like it was earlier in the season, where you were having teams who were only plus 175 or 2-1. All teams above 3-1. You have the Archers plus 300. And then our two guys at plus 350, second best chances heading into the final regular season weekend. I have a ticket on Atlas at plus 1,000. I think I got him before the season at plus 1,600. You have a pretty juicy ticket on Water Dogs. Speaking of value, getting those kind of tickets, both those teams are now plus 350, Doug. I hate to do it, but I think I have to pat us on the back a little bit. Heading into the final week of the season, having, 10-1, in your case, 9-1, I believe, odds on a team. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Tickets we're holding, brother.
So to be fair, and I'll out myself on this one, I pretty much got Water Dogs at like the worst possible value that you could have gotten them at preseason.
Other than plus 350, it's
no. I'm saying preseason. Preseason value, I got them probably at the worst number. I ended up taking them at 7-1, plus 700, which
that's a fun ticket.
It's not bad. It's absolutely not a terrible number. I think earlier in the off season, you could have gotten them like around plus 1,000. You could have gotten them, like 900, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But you know what? Part of that, I think, was also reading where the steam was going. Another little betting theory thing, if you want to talk about that, is, the price will lower, assuming there are not like other factors at play, right? Like assuming there are not other, outside forces at play, aka, player acquisition or an injury or something like that, or wins and losses even. If you're seeing numbers coming down, that means a lot of the time that the public is on this one. So if you saw Water Dogs at 900 and suddenly they're at 700, there's been no team news, there's been nothing happening. That very well just may be that there's a lot of love, a lot of, big money, guys who are confident in what they're going to see in Water Dogs winning that championship. So to my, I definitely need to check myself a little bit and say that I didn't get Water Dogs at a great preseason value. And frankly, if you had waited and you thought that maybe Water Dogs was going to start slow, you could have gotten Water Dogs after the first week or two at like 1,100 or something, and then you'd really be, on easy street. But I'm definitely still happy with where I'm at with this Water Dogs ticket. They look really, really great. Especially with Dylan Ward starting to play a little bit better. I think that was the last piece that they really needed.
I'll tell you what, Ward plays how he does last week. There ain't a team that can beat the Water Dogs. That was incredible effort. What they have offensively, I'll tell you what, sure, I love, pumping up Atlas and really, what happened with them was more just a market perception that was unfair. People overvaluing what happened in that Archers Atlas game. People saying, look at this Archers team. They're going to roll through this whole entire season. And people looking at Atlas and saying, oh, look at how much they got killed by Archers. Since week 1, it's been a different story. Since week 3 or week 4, rather, it's been a much different story for Archers in that case. So I think exactly what you said. You have to come in with your own perceptions, but if you're going to be constantly looking at future markets, you have to be fluid in your opinions. You can't just come into the year saying, I think this team is going to be great and stick with your guns, because it's going to end up losing you a lot of money in the long run. So I think you getting in at 7-1 when you had that opinion. The market by the end of the year agreed with the opinion you had, which is, I don't want to say atypical, but you have to constantly be adjusting how you're viewing teams. And you did that on a weekly basis. You weren't just saying, give me the water dogs, give me the water dogs, give me the water dogs. You were saying, here's where the value is, here's where the value lies. And I think that's what makes you the strong analytical bettor that you are. So kudos to you. I love learning from you, man. I hope the listeners have picked up an nth of what I've been able to pick up picking this guy's brain right here. I love it. I love
you gotta relax, dude. You are much more analytical than I am. First of all, like, I'm not just saying that. Like, you come in here real hot with the numbers. You come in here with, we talk about sharp action. I follow a lot of the sharp action. You are the sharp action from what I've seen. You've even told me, like, you only place bets early on, and I'm like, you have got some serious cojones to do that, man. So I appreciate that with you. I want to hit one more thing on futures just real quick. Taking another trip down the MVP market, because I told you a few weeks ago that I really liked Lyle Thompson. I'm trying to remember where I got him. I must have gotten him around. I think I got him around
7. It was either 8-1 or 7-1, because
I think I got him. I think I got him around
down for me up north as well.
Yeah, so I got him around 8, something like that. He's crept his way back down to 450. I believe Grant Ament was plus 150 around that time. He's gone, his odds have gotten a little longer to 300. Wow. And Jeff Teat, your boy, is at 400. So we're in like a little bit of a dead heat coming into the last week of the season for the MVP race. Grant Ament might have the advantage because he has 2 games left, whereas Teat and Thompson both have 1 game each. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I think if Cannons can get into the playoffs off of a really strong performance from Lyle Thompson, wouldn't be surprised to see him take home MVP. I think the argument for Ament has already been made. I think the argument for Teat has already been made. And so it's, I think if Lyle's going to win this thing, like, he's the one, he has to go out and win it. Yeah. Whereas if it's not going to be Lyle, if Lyle puts up a dud next week, regardless of whether Cannons win or not, it's probably over for him. And then at that point, it's probably just, however the voters really favor Ament or Teat.
Well, 100%. It's so neck and neck between, I think, those 3 names that you lined out there. It's all going to be about the narrative at the end of the year. You know what I mean? Like if I think it would have helped Lyle a lot if the Cannons could have pulled out that win. But I think it's going to end up, who gets a big win, who has one of those really defining moments here down the stretch, because in MVP voting, whether it's for better, whether it's for worse, a lot of the time the votes end up kind of being prisoner of the moment. What have you done for me lately kind of deal? Because I think all 3 of those guys, you look at the body of work this season, you can make a case for any single one of them. So I think some great points that you make there. So folks, those are our thoughts. It's time to get into it. We have not only 2 teams this week that are going to be having 2 games. We have 2 games on Friday, which means 4 teams this week are going to be 2 gamers. So just before we get into the games, for what it's worth, Whipsnakes, their first 2-game weekend is now all teams will have played 2-game weekends, which is, the fair way of how they worked it out, why we get 6 games this week. Whips, it were week 3. They won their first game. They lost their second game. Woods, way back in week 1, that's when they started taking the league by storm. They were 2-0 on opening weekend in their 2-game weekend. Archers, they played 2 games back in week 4. It was a loss and a loss for Archers in their lone 2-game weekend. And for the Chaos, they also played in week 2, and they had a loss and a loss. So Archers Chaos, well, something's going to have to give there, because they can't lose both of the games because they're playing each other on Friday night. So let's get right into it here, Doug. Start looking at the games, and we'll start here on Friday. I guess it would be the 13th. So Friday, August 13th, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so right. You just said it.
If we have any best bets that's a Friday game, just go the opposite way. And actually, I think both of our best bets come on a Friday.
Yikes. Yeah, I just noticed that.
Lucky number 13. We'll get into that. And you know what? We're going to buck the number 13. Screw the number 13. I'm gonna walk across a black cat and shatter a mirror. I'm gonna have all the bad luck coming my way. All right, 6:00 on Friday, the 13th. We got Redwoods minus 1.5 point favorites against Whipsnakes. Both teams 4-3. A lot of low totals this week. 23.5. Now, it was another loss against the spread for the Woods and the Whips as favorites last week. Both of the teams not only cover the number or fail to cover the number, they lose outright. The Woods, they're now only 2-4 against the spread as favorites. The Whips, for what they're worth, they're 1-5 as favorites this year. Yikes. Now, both teams have one time this year been underdogs. They were 1.5. Both teams covered in the lone game that they were underdogs. So in this one, I got a lot of leans this week, and I feel like it's because we have the games a little bit too far away. I will have a best bet. I will have an EMO, but I need official news before I feel confident. I need to know if Matt Rambo is going to be playing in this game. I anticipate he probably won't be, but Coach Staggs said he will be. So we're getting some conflicting information there. You know, how does Guterding change things? How does he work into the Whipsnakes offense? I can't make this an official pick for me, but I can lean the Whips getting the 1.5, knowing that the Redwoods haven't been great as favorites. And the Whips, you know, they've been favorites once they covered it for what it's worth. I have no confidence really back in either of these teams on the spread currently as favorites. I'll lean Whips plus 1.5 in this one. Any strong opinion on that? And for what it's worth, total 23.5.
Yeah. I think you got most of the analysis on the head. It's a little hard to read this game without knowing what's going to be a Rambo. But honestly, even assuming that Rambo's not going to play, I like Whips here. I think Guterding is going to fit in really nicely with them. And as you kind of noted, Redwoods have not been great ATS this year, especially not as favorites. You know, we've talked about, you know, early and middle of the season, how Redwoods sometimes play down to competition. And, you know, obviously this is a, you know, quote unquote rivalry game. They played a lot of big games against each other. You know, the first championship game, semifinals last year. So this is always going to be a competitive one. And if it's going to be really competitive, I'm always looking at, you know, the spread underdog. So I don't know if I'd play this one for sure. I'd like to get a little bit more information, but yeah, I'd be looking at Whips plus 1.5.
And for what it's worth, when these teams did play, the Redwoods, they got their revenge. You know what I mean? And now how much is Whips going to be looking at? All right, you guys got us last week. That's kind of where our descent started. You know, we'll get you back this week with a new piece working in, and they'll have a week to work them in as opposed to making the trade and then having that game on Friday. So I think I'm right there with you. The only way that I would look in this game is Whips. I just need a little bit more information for that to be an official play for me. Speaking of official plays, when the Archers at 4-3 are 1.5 point favorites against the Chaos, who are 3-4, the total 23.5, we'll both have some official plays. So as we mentioned, Friday the 13th at 8:30, you're going to be, you know, what's like good luck, like rabbit's feet, horseshoes, four-leaf clovers. Get all those out and get some good juju working for us, because we're going to pass talking about this Archers Chaos game because both of our best bets come in this one. So you're going to want to stick around until after the break when we let you know where we're looking in this game, two of our favorite looks on a 6-game board this week. We'll move to Saturday, August 14th. Thank God. I don't think 14th of Saturdays are unlucky. Maybe they're lucky. I don't know. I know the Water Dogs are hoping they're lucky because at 4:15 Eastern time on Saturday, the 6-2 Atlas are 1.5 point favorites against your 5-3 Doggos. 25.5, the highest total this week. It's almost poetic because after week one, everybody was saying, look, Atlas, it's going to be a rough year for them. Everybody was after week one saying, Water Dogs, man, it's going to be a rough year for them. They have some growing pains to get through. Is Dylan Ward the guy we thought he was? And now Saturday at 4:15, the two teams that we told everybody this year, Doug, pump your brakes. They are not what the record shows. Well, they're basically facing off, and you could argue it's for first place. It gets crazy if Atlas lose this game. If Atlas win, it's locked up, it's signed, it's sealed, it's delivered. They're your 1 seed. If they lose, then you start scoreboard watching. Then you see some teams maybe trying to run up the score on a Sunday game, trying to get that goal differential. So if Atlas lose this game, it will be Adam Moore's dream, because it will be utter chaos. I'm sure that he will just be like a pig in slop. Doug, I'll give you first crack on this one. Actually, I believe I'll start with the total 25.5, because correct me if I'm wrong. You have a look in this one for your EMO, correct?
I do. And I don't have to go too heavily into this one. Just because I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the total, this is the highest total of the week. It stands alone as the highest total of the week, 25.5. And it's interesting because it's juiced to the over too, which almost, who knows, like maybe people will want to be taking this over. And this is a situation where maybe it would get pushed up to 26.5. And if it gets pushed up to 26.5, then you want to hammer that under.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I would love this at over. I mean, that would have to be, wouldn't that be the highest total of those seasons so far, or no? Am I making that up?
Remember we had that slam dunk
under
28.5 that we
the 28.5. Yeah.
Oh,
shoot.
It still haunts my dreams. Thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
Sorry. I tried to block that out.
I just finished up my 20th therapy appointment. I was finally over that best bet can't lose big cat pick. That it was you, us, and Beast Bets. Our guy Greg. We were all on that under. Pain.
Yeah. Anyhow, well, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, in general, this is a pretty low total week, and so this is the high point of it. I guess I get it. I'm pretty sure Jack Concannon's still out, so you can't get a game from him, like one of his God mode games.
Yeah.
I think JD Colarusso has actually been playing decently in his stead, but
done much drop off. I feel like Concannon went on. I mean, he's arguably the best goalie in the league. However, Colarusso seems like he's a little bit more
consistent.
Maybe. Yeah, he seems like he has a little bit more consistency to his game.
Yeah, so it is so this one's definitely interesting to me, because I would maybe be leaning towards the under there.
I agree. I think you look across 4 out of these 6 games this weekend are all just posted at a 23.5, which at the beginning of the year, we saw 23.5 and they were blind overs. You know what I mean? Like, we saw those numbers and we were like, oh my God, 22.5, 23.5, go over. I think you're clearly seeing the odds makers draw a line in the sand and say, hey, this is the final week of the season. It's do or die time. Goalie's going to be up. Defense is going to be up. I think they're thinking that defense is going to be the star this week. And clearly with the totals they're throwing out there, they believe in that. The fact that majority of these are 23.5, seeing this one a little high. Why would I not just roll with what the bookmakers think and say, well, if all the other games are going to be low, maybe this one is worth the underlook as well. For what it's worth, as far as this game goes, before we move on, since Doug has his EMO coming from this game, Atlas's cover streak came to an end last week, and while they beat the Cannons, they failed to cover that 1.5. While the Water Dogs, they get their first win on a non-double weekend. They were just huge fans of the double stuffed Oreos. Anytime they had 2 games in a weekend, they were just unbeatable. They finally get out of that mold, get a win on a 1-game weekend, and it was utter domination. It was an 11-6 drubbing against the Whips that, to me, didn't even feel that close. It seemed like it was a 20-0 game for what it was worth. In this one, I guess I'll lean Atlas. I would probably look towards more a money line play than a spread play. Would love getting the Dogs plus 1.5, but Atlas is a train that seems like they just keep on rolling. So while I have tried making money stepping in front of trains, I'm not going to step in front of the train this week while I was one of the people who helped push the Atlas train out of the station. This one's going to be a pass for me. I guess I'll lean Atlas on the spread, but if I was playing this game, I would probably look towards the money line for either of the teams. Doug will have more on that a little bit later. 7:00 on Saturday, the 2-6 Bowl. that matters because the PLL and one of these teams could potentially be getting into the playoffs, or one of these teams will get into the playoffs, I guess I should say, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, this is effectively the complete opposite or it's the complete antithesis of the previous game, right? So like, yeah, the first game on Saturday is playing for the 1 seed essentially, and the second game is playing to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
which that's the PLL for you, right? Like literally Saturday is going to be pretty fun to see how that all shakes out.
And I think Saturday will 100% dictate where my money will be going on Sunday. I will be waking up early on Sunday morning to take whatever information we get on Saturday and extrapolate that into the games on Sunday, because you could potentially be having some teams with literally nothing to play for come Sunday. So maybe you see some teams resting, maybe not. But as far as this game goes on Saturday, as I mentioned, 1.5-point favorites, the Cannons, a spot that they have not been great in, 24.5 the total in this one. I have nothing on the total, but before I throw it your way, I'll just run down these ATS numbers that I think are very indicative of expectations and where expectations have either been met or they have been failed to be met. Both teams 2 wins, right? How they got there is very different, though. The Cannons are perfect. They are 5-0 against the spread when they're getting points. As any underdog spot, be it 1.5, be it 2.5, they are 5-0. Yet, when they're 1.5-point favorites, like they are in this game, not only have they not won any of those games, they haven't covered them either. 0-3 as 1.5-point favorites. The Chrome, they've not won nor covered in any game except 2 games that they were 2.5-point dogs, like an automatic spot that we kind of talked about. They beat 2 of the best teams in Archers and Whips. They beat them outright in back-to-back games as 2.5-point dogs. However, in the spot they're in this week, Chrome, as a 1.5-point dog, are 0-5 this year. All those numbers tell me, Doug, keep the spread away from me in this game. I don't want any part of it. It's money line, and it's Cannon's money line. With what we saw from Chrome last week, they really did look like the worst team in every facet of the game in both of their games last weekend. I got Chrome happy last weekend. I ain't doing it again. It's Cannon's money line, -140 for me in this one, if anything. But this could be a game that I just kind of pass and enjoy. What say you, my man?
Just going in on Chrome.
It was bad. It was after you like, because if I just wouldn't have talked myself into Chrome last weekend, I would have had a great weekend. Our pod, we would be strutting our stuff. We would be, but they looked bad. They looked disinterested. They looked just like not a cohesive team. And at this point in the season, I was really surprised to see him looking that out of sorts, especially with an added player with Malloy, who's a great, talented player.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing is, like, I can get on you for that hyperbole or whatever, but I don't disagree with you either. Yeah. Chrome, there's just nothing to like about them right now. Especially with the trade that just went through. Like, you know, you could be very down on Chrome just based on the results of last weekend and how they looked. And then you throw in this trade, which was not just made them more skill wise. It was also, if you, in my opinion, it's probably pretty demoralizing for them. You know, it's like when your team decides to be a seller at the trade deadline, right? Like something like that. There's just nothing to like about Chrome right now. You can't possibly be looking their way. Not even on the spread at +1.5. The smartest play here is probably Cannons -140 on the money line. I would entertain the idea of taking them on the spread too. If you really wanted to be a little risky for the lacrosse playground staff picks, I'd be taking them on the spread also. Even if for my own wallet, I'm probably going to be looking at them for the money line.
Yeah, no, I think you lay it out there perfectly. Now, for what it's worth, when we were talking about betting theory earlier, you want to buy low. Hey, if you're so bold, this is the lowest spot you could possibly buy Chrome at. You want to sprinkle a little bit of them in the future market, plus 20-1 at this point. I don't have the cojones to do it, but hey, if you want to, Doug, if that's your thing, being contrarian is your thing, I won't stop you. You know what I mean?
I'm not going to buy that low. You have to. There's got to be some potential there if you're going to buy low. There's no potential here.
That's like going to the flea market and being like, give me whatever is your most broken good. If you have a broken wheelbarrow with no wheel on it, let me get that. And when I come,
I'm just going to drag it around.
And I have it filled with radishes to the brim. I'm going real like deep cut. Like this is like Amish. Seriously. Like where I'm at in Pennsylvania, we're like in Amish country. So that was like a reference that probably everyone's like, dude, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Radishes and wheelbarrows.
I will say too that this matchup in particular is interesting because we haven't seen a 2.5 point line in a few weeks. And I think if Chrome were playing anybody but Cannons, it would be 2.5.
I 100% agree.
If they were playing literally anybody else, it would probably be 2.5, but only because Cannons are the second worst team in the league.
Yeah.
That's the way it worked out, and it ends up being a 1.5. But there's just no way. And again, I'm almost surprised that Cannons aren't getting favorite pricing on the spread, and that's the only reason why I kind of like the spread is I could have seen them getting favorite pricing here, like minus money, but still getting plus money, plus 110. Like I said, if I was looking ATS, I'd probably do that, but the safer play is definitely taking the minus 140 on the money line.
So 2 quasi playoff games on Saturday for 2 completely different reasons. Somebody's got to get in between the Cannons and the Chrome. We'll see who it ends up being. And I, for one, am excited. I think it's going to be a great 1-2 punch there on Saturday, which brings us to Sunday. Again, I do have an official play in this upcoming game, so I'll throw it your way for the analysis. But these are really 2 games that I'm waiting and finding out what happens earlier this weekend, because you could be looking at a situation where no positioning can be improved, no positioning could be hurt for 2 to potentially all of these teams come Sunday. So I'm passing, even though I do have an EMO that I want to hit before the line potentially moves with information that we may get. Redwoods 1.5 point favorites against the Chaos, another low total at 23.5. Again, I'm abstaining. I'll give you my thoughts after the break here. Any thoughts in this one, or are you kind of attacking Sunday the way I am, Doug?
Most likely, yeah. I'd probably be doing it the same way you are because, there might be meaningless games on Sunday, and you just, unless you're seeing like an edge in the meaninglessness of it, which I don't like, in the NFL, they talk about contract incentives, that kind of thing, which I don't think they have here. It's kind of hard to say. I would say at face value, I'd really like Chaos plus 1.5. They're getting plus money against the Redwoods, who we've already talked about are not great as favorites. Sometimes play down to their competition, and any kind of game, regardless of the implications, Andy Towers is going to get the boys going. I think that Chaos is always up for a game like this, and getting plus money on that plus 1.5 spread seems like a really good spot for them. So I'd be looking at Chouse once again. Love
it. I want that to be my text tone. Whenever I get a text, I just want it to be you saying Chouse. I'll have more in that game coming up. Final for us before we step aside, and then we come back, get you our best bet, get you our EMOs. It's the Archers, the 4-3. I put in air quotes. That will not be their record when they play the 4-3 Whipsnakes on Sunday. Archers 1.5 point favorites against those Whips. Another low total, 23.5. I lean Whipsnakes getting the 1.5 because anytime the Whips are getting points, I'm interested in it, even with how they've struggled this year. I think they have a little bit to maybe prove. Even if this is a game that really doesn't mean much for them, I think they still want to get Guterding acclimated. So I think they still will be having some effort expended on their end. Whereas Archers, you could be potentially looking at a game where, they have their positioning locked up. They know the team that they're going to be playing. They don't have somebody new to get acclimated to. They have, you could argue, maybe the best chemistry offense that's in this entire league outside of Atlas. I lean over due to the offensive outputs in these 2 teams, over 23.5. I lean Whips in this game, but nothing official. I'm just looking forward to seeing this wrap the weekend of what should be a stellar weekend of games. Where are you going in this one, Doug?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. This is not a spot where, it's potential that there's not going to be a whole lot at stake here, which is ironic because I think when PLL threw this game on the schedule, they were like,
was going to be
oh yeah, Like, yeah, Atlas or Archers and Whipsnakes, like it's going to be for the 1 seed,
Same
like blah,
Red
blah,
with
blah.
Chaos,
Like
you could argue, you know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. Like they threw these games on Sunday with the assumption that they would be playing for the 1 seed. Little did they know that game would be played on Saturday.
Yep.
But you know what? All the same, I think it still worked out the way it was supposed to. But obviously, I don't think you can bet this game until Sunday morning or Saturday night, whatever floats your boat. But if I had to lean somewhere, I guess I'd probably be leaning Whips too, for the same reason that you would. Is just that if Whips are getting points, I'd rather just take them, and they probably have a little bit more incentive to actually play well. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if Archers actually, depending on what their playoff situation is like. Again, this all changes if Water Dogs win on Saturday.
Exactly.
If Water Dogs win on Saturday, this could be an entirely different conversation.
You might have to have an emergency State of the Union, like Facebook or not Facebook Live, like a Twitter Space or something, and be like, everything we said in the podcast this week, disregard it. We're changing it all. Who knows? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Doug.
Yeah, but all the same, at this moment in time, got to be looking at the underdog Whipsnakes right here, plus 1.5, minus 120.
He's Doug Greenberg at Doug Greenberg on Twitter. I'm Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks on Twitter. And this is me doing a read for Anchor. So there we go. The final live read of the regular season. Next time we're talking, it's going to be playoffs. I can't believe it. Playoffs already.
Playoffs.
Well, it's time to hear from our ladies. Oh, thank you. And, not to toot our own horn, knock on wood. Hopefully the 13th, the Friday 13th, doesn't completely screw us. Let's stay red hot. 4-0 straight on our best bets. I'll give you first crack, Doug, on our Friday the 13th best bet double pack. What do you got for the folks, man?
Best of luck. Here we go. I am looking at, in Chaos Archers, we're looking at Archers minus 1.5, minus 140. The one thing I've been maintaining in the recent weeks, well, I guess really just last week, is that the All-Star break sort of served as like a reset for a lot of teams. And I think that's especially true for Archers. The first couple of weeks of the season, we were talking about Archers as one of the best teams in the league, arguably the best team in the league. And they looked fantastic last week. They pretty much proved my thesis correct. And if that thesis is also somewhat correct, I think Chaos looked all right last week, but I think that if Archers are playing up to their full potential, I don't think Chaos has much of a chance. That attack core for Archers is just going to, tear up that Chaos defense. Not going to be able to do anything to them. So I think Archers can take this one pretty handily. I really love them, minus 1.5, minus 140.
We'll get those bank rolls in order, folks, because Friday night is going to be a big night for those who have been rolling with the BOL boys here, because my best bet also comes in the Archers Chaos game, and I have the Chaos. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going head-to-head again this week. I have the over 23.5 in the Archers Chaos game. Look, I know, anytime when Reardon's in goal, it's scary betting an over. But an anemic Chrome offense just pushed Chaos late in the game last week to have that game go over a low total as well. So I think, as Doug alluded to there, Chaos offense has picked up a little bit of steam, not enough to make me like them outright or on the spread in this game, but the Archers offense is always one face-off win away from scoring 20 points by themselves. Neither team have a real face-off edge in this one. I'd be surprised if this one stays under a low total, even with the books expecting a low-scoring week. Give me over 23.5. And hopefully we stay hot heading on into playoffs. So there is our best bets, and it's EMO time already. Last EMO of the regular season. I'll hit you, folks. I'm going with the Chaos. Sure, maybe not enough to like them in Friday's game, but if you listen to the episode, Chaos plus 1.5 is going to be my EMO. It's plus 120 right this moment on DraftKings. Redwoods are 2-4 as favorites this year against the spread. While they've won games with regularity, they haven't covered them with regularity, and it's a very real possibility that the Redwoods maybe have already made up any ground that they could in the standings. What happens in that Atlas game will make me like or stay off this bet a little bit more, but it's almost a free roll as the Chaos are looking to avoid elimination or getting the 7th seed, obviously not getting in there. We've also seen them come on late in the year. Give me Chaos plus 1.5, plus 120, my final EMO of the regular season. What say you, Douglas Fresh?
All right. I'm looking at Water Dogs plus 105. My boys, the Doggos. Here's
Money
why.
line time for the Doggos.
Here's the thing. I sometimes don't like to bet in like really big high stakes games. It's not always great. But what we've seen from Water Dogs lately, right before the All-Star break and last week, this finally looks like a team that they're pulling everything together. Like they finally figured it out. And you were talking about earlier in the show, how you have these prior assumptions about teams and you have to kind of temper those expectations throughout the season. My prior, expectation for the Water Dogs going into the season, because I placed a future on them, was saying this is a potential championship caliber team, right? And early on, maybe we weren't so sure, but they seem to have figured it out. They have all the pieces. And I think the biggest piece of it is Dylan Ward finally figuring out what he needed to do in that Water Dogs goal. I think that they can win this game, send the entire PLL into chaos going into Sunday, not knowing who that 1 seed is going to be. So give me Water Dogs plus 105, just a little bit of plus money going into that Saturday game.
Man, I love it. I love it. We come into the year hot takes. We head out of the year with hot takes. The Water Dogs on the money line against the number 1 seeded, currently 6-2 Atlas. It's going to be a great weekend, folks. This does it for us. You can always find us on Twitter. You can get me at Newbie Talks. You can get him at Doug Greenberg. Check out his daily weekday column, The Rundown. A lot of great information there. And for the producer, Hutton Jackson, at Hutton Jackson on a 10-0 run. Keep it going, my man. I am Dan Alexander. That does it for us. Make sure you drop us some reviews. Make sure you subscribe and hit us up on that money line hotline. I see a lot of people tweeting at us, telling how amazing their picks have been, letting us know that they were 1,000 and 1,000 and they never lose any bets to start the year. Well, why don't you strut your stuff on the money line hotline? Check out the description in the link. And again, for Doug, for Hutton, I'm Dan. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks' time. Best of luck, everybody.